You have 15 seconds to ponder, and then you got to give us a under 1 minute explanation. I want you to tie together discipleship, Jesus, and some aspect of Star Wars in one statement.
Anakin Skywalker turns into Darth Vader because I think, in part, because Qui-Gon, who his was going to be his master and was a father-like figure to him, passes away. Instead, he gets Obi-Wan, who is a brother-like figure, and Anakin's formation is kind of off. I think you need both in discipleship. You need those who are your those that you can look up to as fathers and mothers, and those you can look to as brothers and sisters.
The first date I took my bride on was the first Star Wars movie opened.
Did they have music back then, right? Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Disciple Dilemma. I'm Dennis Allen, along with Raymond Monroe, and today we want to talk about being a millennial and a disciple and a pastor. Now, it's tough to become a pastor, a lot of challenging work just to get through the studies, but it's even more challenging to actually be one. So with that, if you start looking at this life, you can understand why 45% of the pastors that we've hosted on this podcast have left their role as a pastor. They've gone on to something else. And if I was in the pastor's perspective, what's going on with all the people like you and like me out in the pews? Let's talk to an Anglican pastor and find out what's going on in his world. Thomas Ryden grew up in Sharpsburg, Georgia, southwest side of Atlanta. He received a call to ministry while he was at Samford University, where he also happened to meet his bride, Brittany. He served in youth and worship ministry roles, and he is now the assistant rector at Apostles Anglican, Knoxville, Tennessee. Thomas enjoys watching and reading and talking about all things involved with Star Wars. He plays guitar. He got his BA in classics from Samford University, his MDiv from Emmanuel Christian Seminary in 2015. Let's have a chat with Thomas and find out what's going on as a disciple in the Anglican world. Here we go. Thomas Ryden, who is in Knoxville, Tennessee, as the assistant rector at Apostles Anglican Church. Thank you for joining us on the Disciple Dilemma.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
You mentioned after your first year at Samford, you really got in close with your youth pastor. Tell me how you viewed that as simply hanging out versus discipleship, as you understand discipleship. Did you feel like you were discipled that year?
Yeah, I think so, definitely. Just so he had been my youth pastor since 10th grade. So we kind of had a that youth pastor relationship before that. And then it was kind of like when we changed to working together, um, it would be like we had tasks to do, but he cared obviously about my formation as a person still. It was really like a kind of come and follow me and do what I do sort of thing. Like I would sit in his office and talk about the students that we had, how we were approaching reaching them, how we were planning, for the church camp that we were planning 3 weeks from now. And he just kind of let me and the other interns that were working do his job with him. And it was almost like it seemed like an apprenticeship. It was called an internship, but it was I got to get my hands dirty. It wasn't just like, hey, you go and do this task, or you go and get lunch for everybody or whatever. Sometimes you needed to do that stuff, but it was hey, let's collaborate and work together. And I think there was a trust there that was afforded to me that gave me a lot of confidence.
Do you think about your friends at Samford? How many of them have gone none, done, ex-evangelical, convert? What's your gut feel on that?
There definitely have been some, and gosh, it's hard to put a number on it. It's interesting because I've had friends actually go kind of both ways. I have relationships where at Samford there wasn't much interest in church. It wasn't, and then after, through some life experience, really sought that out. And I know of folk who were really, really involved and then have gone on a more, like an ex-evangelical sort of route. If I was thinking, it's tough. Maybe about half.
Did you have anybody at Sanford that you would say really came in close and discipled with or for you while you were there?
This is something I'm realizing as I am getting older. I did not seek that out in the way that I should. I think I thought, just with the way I thought mentorship was something that would come to me. And I am realizing more and more as I get older that when there's something that you're seeking, you should ask for it. And so this is something I would want to tell myself at 18. I would say, seek out somebody that you want to mentor you. So I had a lot of great professors, and my chair of the classics department in particular was wonderful, Dr. Stephen Todd. But I didn't take that next step of like, hey, I want to do things like you do. I want to be the kind of adult that you are. And I didn't take that step. I did have a lot of close peer relationships at Sanford. Well, I say a lot. I guess I had a fullness of close relationships because they were actually it was a smaller group, but it was a lot of close friends. In fact, one of those close to your friends is part of the reason we moved to Knoxville. One of my best friends from Sanford lives here. He was a religion major going through Sanford, and they were the friends that drew us to Apostles. And 3 days a week now, my son plays with his youngest son while they share childcare together. And so that has, as I think about it, that was kind of like a mutual discipleship relationship that has continued now. Gosh, we met in 2007. So we are in year, oh goodness, we are going strong year 15, 16, 17.
If you looked at your friends who went through seminary, we talked for a few minutes ago, you were bringing up the idea it's hard to get out of seminary without being a little cynical. If you sort of gave us an anecdotal out of the 100% of folks that you had relationships with in seminary, how many of them are into the ministry as they come out of seminary, and however many of that group are still in the ministry? What's it look like?
As I look at now among those who are in a traditional kind of brick and mortar church, maybe about half of those are still in. Some others kind of went into traditional kind of both small and big churches. I've seen some friends transition out of ministry into some kind of parachurch organization. So whether that's something back at Emmanuel or an adjacent kind of a church adjacent institution. So that's where, as I think of who is still in vocational ministry, a lot of the chaplains are sticking with it. I think it's a super noble and obviously fulfilling and high calling. I'm speaking biased here because that's what my dad does, and I look up to my dad a lot.
One of the things that Dennis and I have really been focused on, when you look at discipleship, we have undervalued the peer-to-peer partnerships of disciples sharing life together and made it more of a pyramid mentoring scheme where I'm going to convert the world in 20 years by getting to and having them get to, and that kind of evangelistic discipleship, rather than a lifetime of friendship and sharing our journey in Christ together. How is that so much missing in both the seminary framework and in the church today, so that ministers really don't feel that they have those lifelong friends that are sharing ministry together.
One of the things is Emmanuel had affordable on-campus housing that had us living in community with one another. And it was the best place to live because it was for the price. Like it was very affordable, particularly for our first apartment when, between the two of us, two grad students, we were working about a half-time job, between the two of us. And something as simple as that, because that takes a significant investment, but it was just huge in being, I can go down the hall, down my street and just see, an international student with their entire family, living there, or friends from other classes. And, I could just walk up to the library on campus. And so that was huge. I think as to why it doesn't happen, I just think there's so much to do. This is something we're doing. So the Anglican Church in North America is divided up into dioceses, and our diocese is divided up into deaneries. And our deanery is the Deanery of Knoxville, and we're having just clergy breakfasts monthly that our area dean is organizing. And I think it's just more stuff like that. But the fact is, when things like that are happening on a Tuesday morning and you have bulletins to print and you have this hospital visit that you need to make, and you're already behind on prep for your sermon, and oh my goodness, Lent is coming. And I think sometimes there's something about ministry work that you are wearing so many hats at a time, and COVID escalated this, right? Because we're already supposed to be teachers and counselors and all these things, and now we're supposed to be health scientists and technology experts as well, and there's just, I think there's so much to do, and there is sometimes, with all the best intentions, I mean, I'm speaking about myself personally, I am more likely to, on a busy week, to blow off time with those peer-to-peer relationships because, if I do that, I won't get X, Y, and Z done. And I think it might be just the tyranny of that immediate thing. I have to get this.
So wouldn't you think that if you had those kinds of peer relationships with some of the senior people in the church, mm-hmm. some of that burden could be shared so that you had collaboration rather than the minister has to do all the heavy lifting?
Sure. I think that would, and we have the blessing of a lot of, we have some great volunteer clergy here too. So we particularly for a congregation of our size, we have quite a few clergy, and there's a good balance of that here. That was, that was one thing that really drew me just to working where I am, is just the culture here is very against that tyranny of the immediate. Like, there are things that are important, but we're not going to necessarily live at the world's pace.
As we look at life at Apostles Anglican right now, how do you see people interacting as wingmen, mentors, or followers of others in discipleship?
That's great. I would love to grow. I would love for us to grow in this area. It's also because, I mean, in particular, as we see like young people, some of the I can't quote the study, but like one of the number one factors in holding on to faith into adulthood is Christian adults that are not your parents. And we're trying to foster those sorts of relationships. We have something we do called table groups. That is a ministry that I help out with, where we just it's not a small group because those tend to be like self-selected, we took out a map of Knoxville and drew circles around people who live near one another. So it's kind of like it's kind of like a neighborhood outpost kind of ministry, but we also
Yep.
hoped that it would be intentionally intergenerational.
Actually, what I just a comment on the table thing first. That's fascinating, Thomas. To me, you're letting God in his providence. And one of the things I'm learning as a 69-year-old is that I've inadequately appreciated God's providential care. And so when you draw a circle around a community and whoever happens to live there is in that table group, you're just relying on God's providence to bring the right group of people together. It's fascinating how that really works. I did want to ask a more serious question, though. Having moved from a traditional Presbyterian setting where the congregation was defined more or less as people who held to the same understanding of the faith, to a more traditional church, being Lutheran, where you have a more parish kind of mentality. It's not a system anymore, but a mentality. The church becomes more of a community center than a community itself. And you have the sacramental system where people go through confirmation. And once they've gone through confirmation, one of the implications is now I know everything I need to know to be a Christian. All I need to do is show up for the services and participate in the liturgy. And so the criticism of it being too rote or liturgical can be a legitimate concern, especially when it comes to people continuing to grow in their faith. How are you trying to grapple with the challenge of discipleship in terms of people actively engaged in their Christianity in their everyday life in that sort of traditional Anglican environment?
I think people are hungry for practice and commitment and uh, adherence to a form. I think this is one of the reasons why some people are drawn, particularly out of maybe more free church traditions, to the forms. Is I want to enter into a way of life. I know, and so when we can say something like uh, we're praying some of the same prayers every day, and we're reading some of the same scriptures if we're doing, the daily office or a piece of the daily office. I think there is an aspect of that that is rote, in that it's standardized, but it's also a common discipline that we can then bring into our relationships.
One of the things that we've grappled with and talked to people about is the gospel today is really about the meaning and purpose of life, the authenticity of what it means, not just my get out of hell free card, but what is it that I really am? It seems to me that you're saying that the sacraments are really the core of the reality of the faith rather than just a liturgical exercise.
I agree with that. It's just there is a fullness, and just a full understanding. I've talked with folk in different traditions that don't have as rich of a sacramentology, that will speak about, there's almost an ache for that. We have communion, but it just kind of seems like a formality, and then we go on to the church announcements or whatever, and then the pastor gets up to preach, and I felt some of that. I've felt some of that too in some of the experiences I've had, and just a robust theology of sacrament just seems to really change that game. Yeah.
Let me be a little bit provocative so you can hold your hands up if you don't want anybody to see this. But on the other hand, one of the things I've been fascinated with is if I believe that Christianity is the reality that I live in, not a faith I've chosen as my spiritual life, but it's really the reality I live in, that Jesus is really the Christ, then when I have children, I want to teach them from day one that they belong to Jesus and that they're obligated to him. And the only choice they have is not to convert to Christianity, but to abandon the faith. And because of that, I'm a big enthusiast now, more than I ever have been, about infant baptism. But I'm telling my children from day one, and of course, in a Lutheran setting, if you ask me if I'm saved, I'm going to tell you I'm baptized, not because I think that replaces faith, but because my trust is in the promise I got from Jesus when he gave me his name, not some decision that I made. So you and your bride are a relatively young married couple. I don't know if you have any kids yet, but you've got to deal with the question of whether or not you're going to do the baptism.
So my son Charlie is about to turn 2 in March, and we baptized him last November on All Saints Sunday. So so that kind of sacramental view of baptism, I think, just that emphasis on Scott McKnight, who's an Anglican theologian, wrote, "It takes a church to baptize." That was helpful for me because I came from a believers and immersion only tradition. That's how I was baptized, and but just seeing baptism as the gift that it is. And now I think, as I think about my son, we're going to teach him, we've also made vows in your name to raise you in the faith. And when the time comes, I'm a little bit both and you here, because in our Easter Vigil service, we renew our baptismal vows. I renew my we are called to renew our clergy vows yearly at our synod. We as a people are all called to renew our baptismal vows at the Easter Vigil, and so we are. Jesus says, "Go and be baptized." He also says, "Come and follow me." And so I want my life, I want my son's life to be a continual yes to Jesus, and baptism being that great marker of that gift.
So if folks want to creep your world and find out more about what you're up to, where's the website that we can have people reach out to you on? How do they connect with you?
You can see what we're doing at apostlesonline.org. You can check us out there. But Twitter is probably the most active space I am in terms of like social media.
Thomas Ryden, Associate Rector at Apostles Anglican Church, Knoxville, Tennessee. Thank you for being with us on the Disciple Dilemma.
Yeah. Thanks so much. Thanks so much, guys.
Yeah, thanks.
Would you help the church think more about discipleship? Would you help us get the conversation started to talk about the biblical discipleship Jesus gave us? Please follow us. Our website, www.thediscipledilemma.com. You can find us on YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and all the RSS feeds. If you'd follow or like us, you'll help us get leverage in the digital marketplace to talk about the fact that discipleship needs to be talked about. And as always, folks, thanks for listening.